With the new wave and the new variants of COVID-19 and the potential real lockdown in several countries, have you already taken any notes from ADB, the potential economic shock that we might face this 2021, Ahmed?
Well, I think that's all reflected in the growth numbers, that we shared with you. So as I mentioned, our 2021 growth estimate for Indonesia is we do expect a bounce back. Relatively strong both in 2021 and 2022. Our current estimate is 4.5%. I think a bit of that in the case of Indonesia, perhaps I can answer specifically, we expect both the external environment and to a certain extent the domestic environment to be supportive. As far as the external environment goes, there's three things I'd point to. The first is that Indonesia's two largest export partners, the United States and the PRC, will be relatively healthy, we expect, in this year. We have a $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill in the United States, as well as a $2 trillion infrastructure bill in the pipeline. PRC growth has also been very strong. The commodity cycle looks like it will be supportive coming into the next year. And then, of course, FDI inflows into Indonesia should be healthy on the back of both strong exports and a positive commodity cycle. On the domestic side, I think the government's made the right moves, and it will continue, we expect, to act with a steady hand. So the accommodative fiscal policy, the $47 billion PEN program, almost 5% of GDP, hopefully will be matched by some increase in consumer demand as the crisis continues to come towards an end. We continue to keep a watchful eye on what you've already mentioned, which is variance. But certainly we think that Indonesia is in a good spot. We expect 2021 to be a year of recovery, although we are by no stretch of the imagination out of this crisis.
That's our prayer, really. Well, 2020, the government already gives its best effort in terms of giving the stimulus, incentives, and flexibility, and so forth. How do you see this? How will this impact or further the financial burden for Indonesia as a nation, even though some are still maintaining its confidence toward Indonesia's GDP growth?
Well, I'm not worried about Indonesia's ability to pay for the enormous and appropriately large fiscal response. You'll note, for example, that Indonesia's credit rating hasn't changed throughout this crisis, even though its debt to GDP is up by a third. Now, the good news is that it started this crisis in a very good place, 30% debt to GDP, very, very low compared to its peers. Now, the other thing I would say about the stimulus is, while we think about it as an expenditure, I think it's more appropriate to think about it as an investment. And like all good investments, it will pay for itself.